One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. I'm here at the 2019 NACDA convention, and I'm joined by Dr. Jamil Northcutt. Jamil is the Vice President for Player Engagement at Major League Soccer. Greetings, Jamil. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Jamil, your experience, 20 years overall in terms of working in sports, 15 in terms of administration. Of course, some of that time was as a student athlete. You were an intern with the SEC. You've done some work with the NFL in player development, football operations, player personnel, a couple stints there with the NFL, worked with a couple teams, player engagement. You spent a good amount of time on campus at Mississippi in internal operations. You were with the NCAA in football development. On top of all that, now you're adjunct faculty at University of Central Florida. So you have a wealth of experience in terms of dealing with the student athletes or the players, the administration, running games, running associations, and those kind of things. So I wonder, with your role now in Major League Soccer, how does that overlap with the NCAA or with college soccer or with development of the players that either are going into college, coming out of college, or the ones that are in college now?
Yeah, so I think what we do in sports is all monolithic. We're all after the same things. We all have a lot of the same major stakeholders. One of the major stakeholders that we definitely need to be focusing on and paying attention to is the student athlete in the collegiate model, but also our players who we refer to as in the professional model. And so when we're looking at the bridge or this cross-pollination, so to speak, as it relates to collegiate athletics and professional sports, education is the bedrock of this nation. And so it's a huge foundation for us. And our athletes, when we're looking at transitions, so the definition of transition is any event or non-event that results in changes in relationships, assumptions, roles, and routines. And we're talking about transitions that could be on the field. We're talking about transitions that could be off of it. These things can be good or bad, but education is a prereq, and it's essential for these guys to be able to make these transitions on and off the field. The reason I say that is that we all need jobs. And so a prerequisite to getting a job is post-secondary education. So there's a job study that's in Georgetown right now. It says that 65% of the jobs in this kind of recovery market are going to require some type of post-secondary education. So what we want to do in our group in player engagement at Major League Soccer is to kind of take this knowledge that I've developed over the years, but how do we partner with our institutions? We have athletes that range from 16 in our league all the way up to about 35. And so we want to make sure that we are creating opportunities for them to go back to school and partner with our academic institutions. Some of our players, I could argue that most of them have come through the collegiate system, and so they're tied to these institutions, and we want to make sure that we bridge the gap and reconnect with them as well.
That mix, I guess the mix of your players, right? I mean, soccer is an international game, right? Outside the United States, it's crazy. What is the general mix of players in Major League Soccer here in the United States in terms of college athletes, international players, people that, like you mentioned, 16-year-olds that didn't go to college? What is the percentage of just the mix of players?
Yeah, so I can tell you this. We have about 70%, not 70%, we have about 70 players represented from different countries in our league. Every time we do presentations, when we go out to the clubs, we have to translate those into Spanish and French. And so it's an international game. When we start looking at, our Canadian teams that we have a heavy Hispanic population and other players and transactions coming to and from other countries. When you look at the collegiate model, the space is the same. When you're looking at all these sports that are global, your tennises, your basketballs, your soccers, I think about the TOEFL scores and, people studying English as a second language and having to have a certain percentage when I was in the collegiate space. So these things are very important when you look at our global game. It's great for us to have a diverse league. And so we want to make sure that we have diverse experiences. And then also at our clubs, it's important, too, when we have players that come from the international markets, we have individuals that teach English that are part of our club system. So, again, like I said, education is the bedrock for us, and making sure that we're partnering with local institutions and individuals that can kind of help us advance the game of soccer. But also, again, we want the athletes, because they're a major contributor to what we're doing, we want them to be able to make these successful transitions after they get through playing.
Right, and you'll have to forgive my ignorance here, but your interaction with college coaches, I guess. Obviously, we're both football guys, and you have to be enrolled in an academic institution to play football between 13 and 22. But in terms of soccer, it's club. If they do decide to go to college, then they get recruited from a club team. Your interaction with college coaches on potential players who I guess can get drafted, or like, tell me about that whole aspect of Major League Soccer and that thing.
Yeah, so I'll break it down like this. So we look at our demographics. We service the future, which are our players who are not necessarily in the league. We service our now group, who are our active players, and we also service our beyond group, which is our group of former players who have matriculated through MLS or maybe even other leagues, but they've been a part of Major League Soccer. So when we kind of focus on the future group, which are the players that may be in our academy systems, but these individuals need to have different pathways that they can choose. And so it's important for us to partner with the Regulatory Affairs Office at the NCAA, which I was a part of in the football development group, and knowing AMA, Academic and Membership Affairs, understanding Keisha Martin and her group, who is affiliated with the Eligibility Center, John Duncan and his group, in enforcement to kind of understand the rules and the pathways. Because, again, there's all types of rules associated with dealing with agents, et cetera. What can you accept? What can you not accept? What can you do, even as it pertains to participating with professional teams and practicing with them, et cetera. So we had to make sure that our players are educated. So kind of a tangible example of that is that we just had our Generation Adidas Cup in Dallas, where we feature our under 18, under 17, under 16, under 15 teams that are part of our DA, which is our developmental academy. And we had some educational content that we presented to them about the different pathways that they could take. So Elliot Charles, who was at Clemson, we brought him in to talk about NCAA eligibility, what that is, what they can and can't do. Future programming will involve parents to kind of educate them about these particular career tracks. Again, our mission statement in player engagement is to engage and equip players with strategies to succeed, no matter if they are in our future group or in our now group or beyond group. They need to have information so they can make really good decisions and choices.
And then circling back to you, usually people get hired to solve a problem. Was there an aspect of player engagement before you arrived at Major League Soccer? Or did they just bring you in to expand what existed? Tell me about the aspect of
No, the unique thing about the job is that it's a blank canvas. It didn't exist. And so Commissioner Garber, who is our leader, he just won Sports Executive of the Year in Major League Soccer. He came from the football space. We got other individuals that's been associated with soccer at a high level, like Oliver Luck, who was with the Houston Dynamo, who I worked for and with at the NCAA as the EVP for Regulatory Affairs. He's now the commissioner of the XFL. And so you start looking at men like that who have a focus to make sure that we empower the athlete. To Commissioner Garber's all about empowering them. But they also were looking for a person who had a skill set that could kind of go back and forth in these arenas to be able to solve an issue. And given my background as a student athlete, I played football. I always tell people, I joke all the time, I've gone from football to football. And so being able to do that, I know the major players, I know the people, I have the relationships, but also I have a strategy and a plan. I care about the athlete. And it's about them, again, making those transitions. I always tell people all the time that the sports are distinctively similar. The distinction is the transactions, where they come from, the international market, et cetera. But the similarity is that we all want to be successful. We all need a sense of purpose that we have in life. And so being able to find what that motivation is, but being also able to help them develop those strategies to succeed beyond just playing. Because, again, they're our future. So students that are in the collegiate market, our players that are at the professional space, we got to figure out ways to utilize our ecosystem to develop and train them. And so we have championships that we did in the collegiate space. Here in Orlando on July 31st, our All-Star game takes place. So given my experiences in the higher education landscape, you're able to engage students who might be able to serve as volunteers. They get a chance to gain real-life experience. They get a chance to develop relationships with people. So how do we utilize our ecosystem as a whole to keep succession planning moving forward? Again, we're training people and developing people. You and I, you sitting across the table from here, somebody's got to do your job when you decide to hang up the mic and the headphones, and at the end of the day, when I'm done, we want to make sure that sports are in good hands because we all care about them. It's such a great arena for society, and so being able to kind of create those opportunities for people to move beyond just playing or administrating is important. We got to develop the next generation.
Right. I got a couple more questions for you. First, relative to you coming in, creating this whole player engagement and player development for Major League Soccer, do you also create the measures of success? Like, how will you know if you're doing a good job, I guess? When you come in with a blank slate, obviously everything is good from that point forward, but obviously being a leader that you are, you want to be able to evaluate and evolve. So tell me how you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you start looking at measures of success, there's research studies associated with goal setting and how well it helps you perform. But for us, right now we're trying to figure out what the problem is. And so obviously having a background, a PhD, I am a researcher. And so I know how to do those types of things and to create strategy and also methodologies of studying our players. So one of the first things we got to do is we got to find out information. So not only from our player population, but also from the administrators and other stakeholders around the game of what are the issues. Once you kind of figure out what the issues are, then now you can start creating solutions. You can start doing pilot programs to kind of solve these particular problems. And so metrics, one of the major issues that we're going through right now is our former player group. So they've never been engaged. So generally folks have played soccer, they leave, and nobody has reached out to them. So now one of the data points for us is that we can say, all right, we have like 3,500 players that have been, I'll use the word displaced. Nobody's reached out, nobody's engaged them. So what's our reclamation metric that we want to take on to bring these players back into the league? Again, we want to celebrate these players. We want to create a community for them. We want these guys to always know that they're welcome. They built the league. And what's different about soccer compared to football and basketball right now, we're relatively young. We're looking at 24 years of age here in MLS, and so we'll turn 25 next year, which we'll hopefully have some big celebrations. But at the same rate, too, we create metrics like that based off of some of the information that we've been able to gather over the years to make sure that we're following along. So we'll say we want to reclaim a percentage of certain players in the future so that we can kind of get them back in the fold. So that's just one tangible example of how we create metrics based off of issues that exist.
Sounds great, right? Exactly. I'll ask this final question here. Soccer is becoming more and more popular here in the States. I read an article one time about how soccer in Atlanta is like flying off the charts, right?
Yeah, one of our greatest markets.
Right. I mean,
excited about that.
You talk about neighborhoods that probably you and I came from, and soccer's the biggest sport in the neighborhood kind of thing. So talk to me a little bit about that and how that's helping what you do and helping just Major League Soccer as a whole.
Yeah, our leadership, from Commissioner Garber to, my boss Joanne Neal and Gary Stevenson and also Mark Abbott, who was there from the inception of it. They've done an exceptional job of really growing the game and also expanding it. And when you go to markets like Atlanta, nobody thought that it might have been a success. But then also when you start looking at the demographics of our country, like those things are changing, and it's good. When you start looking at diversity studies and inclusion studies, it talks about the business implications associated with it. And for folks that come from places that like we do, being able to have soccer as an option is huge. And I grew up playing soccer, but then I ended up transitioning to football. But now when you start looking at the demographics of this nation and also the population, man, soccer is growing even at the youth level. There are a lot of individuals that you see, soccer fields are packed. Every weekend when you go, I know my son plays, their travel teams. There's just a whole interscholastic youth space of everybody playing soccer. And then that also is inclusive of people of color. And so that's great, for our nation. It's great for our game as we develop, and also I'd like to say, too, we need to make sure that we support our U.S. women's national team. So they play today. They play Thailand, and so we're rooting for them to bring this World Cup home as well.
Jamil, this has been an excellent conversation. I feel like I'm educated a little bit on soccer and especially on some of the things you do. I think Major League Soccer was probably excited to bring you on and develop this engagement program that you're developing. I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate the time, man. I'm excited about being in Major League Soccer and making a difference.
That was Dr. Jamil Northcutt. He is the Vice President for Player Engagement at Major League Soccer. And, of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.